Now to that latest in the conflict in Israel and Gaza. The Red Cross confirming overnight the two more hostages held in Gaza have been released by Hamas. Two women, 85-year-old Yocheved Lifshitz and 80-year-old Nurit Cooper, were freed and taken to the Egyptian side of the Rafah border. Egyptian TV showed the women being loaded into ambulances.
It comes after Prime Minister Rishi Sunak addressed the Commons yesterday and pledged £20 million in humanitarian aid to Palestinians affected by the conflict in Gaza.
Joining us now, my friends, is Dr Einat Wilf, a former intelligence officer in the Israeli Defence Forces. And generally, we sit here every day trying to understand the scale of what's going on. Third week of the conflict, how does your average Israeli person process what's going on, the news and the daily up and downs? Explain that to our viewers, if you'd be so kind.
We're actually still processing what happened on October 7th. The retail one-by-one brutality. We're learning the stories, the torture, the atrocities. It's coming out. Even the whole hostage situation is a form of mass psychological torture of drip. The women who were released, their husbands are still being held. Their families were murdered. People were being burnt alive. We know now of the murderers calling their families to plead, to speak with pride. And we understand what we've always known, but now it's so evident, that for the last century, the Palestinians as a people made it very clear that their problem is not with what Israel does, but with what Israel is, a state of sovereign and free Jews. And the idea that sovereign and free Jews can exist anywhere in the land, in any borders, has always been anathema. And we now understand that the scale of what we're facing is not one group, Hamas, not tens of thousands of highly trained murderers. We know we face an idea that wants nothing less than our complete disappearance and is willing to take very brutal action to achieve it. And we understand that the open vision...
Can I jump in a second? I just want to clarify something, because as I said to you, for me, this is about education as personally, as well as the people that are watching and listening. You're passionate. I completely get that. I have been fervent in my support of the Jewish population, and certainly some of the anti-Semitic crimes and attacks we've seen over there. I find them abhorrent. You talk about the whole Palestinian race there. Would it not be fair to say that the extermination of that terrorist cell that is Hamas, is it fair to assume that Hamas speaks for all Palestinians? I'd like your take on that, if you'd be so kind.
I speak of a people, of course, not of a race. We want to believe in the comforting delusion that Hamas is somehow separate from the Palestinians. But Hamas, when they committed the atrocities they did, when they planned it for over a year, carefully, meticulously, they knew that they were doing it on behalf of the idea of free Palestine, from the river to the sea. They were doing it on behalf of an idea that made them believe that all actions are legitimate in order to carry out the notion that no sovereign and free Jews should exist anywhere in the land. Hamas is merely the last in a long line of murderous terrorist organizations that have always come out of the Palestinian people in order to realize this idea of no Jewish state anywhere. And the only parallel, the only vision for peace, I have to believe in the possibility of a different world of peace. The only vision for peace we have is by looking at Japan, is by looking at Germany, and looking at what those societies were, what they did, and what they are today. And to understand that the idea of those societies, it wasn't just enough to kill Hitler. The need was to change the entire ethos of what Germany was. The entire people of Japan needed to change who they are. And therefore, the Palestinian people as a people will have to change their vision away from their century-long destructive singular focus on the Jews not having a state anywhere, to developing a constructive vision of living side by side the sovereign state of
which
the
is the two-party system, isn't it? Two-state system.
Einat, I just wanted to ask what your response is to Jewish people globally, particularly in America at the moment, who have staged a peaceful protest at the US Capitol. Jews around the world who are calling on Israel to take part in a ceasefire. What's your response to them?
The vast majority of Jews are standing by Israel, are horrified and alone, and they see the hatred. They see that it's not just Hamas, it's globally, it's everywhere. It's in the streets of Berlin and London. We're not even seeing one Palestinian person stand in Trafalgar Square with a sign that says, "Not in my name." We're not saying Palestinians disavowing what happens. There are some Palestinians...
Sorry, Einat, I've got to challenge you on that. I've got to challenge you on that. We are seeing an awful lot of Palestinian people who are disavowing the actions of Hamas and say, absolutely, Hamas does not represent who they are or who they want to be led by. I've got to say that is not factually correct.
It's actually not true. Where if there were truly Palestinians, I mean, yes, there's a lone voice here, a lone voice there, but we're told that the Palestinian Authority, for example, are moderates. They did not issue any, where's the horror, where are the condemnations? There needs to be international pressure brought to bear on the so-called moderate Palestinians to issue condemnations, and then they don't do it.
Einat, can I move it on? Can I move it on and ask you from a personal point of view, which is how I started this?
Yes.
There's no doubt that those atrocities 3 weeks ago now were the most grotesque and appalling I think the world has seen since 9/11. I think they were genocidal, and I absolutely stand by those comments that I made that somehow that terrorist cell needs to be taken out. Obviously, from afar, we look at what that might mean for the Middle East. And naturally, and Nicola has a point, there will be millions of people across the world who will talk about the humanitarian situation. Of course, as a proud Israeli woman, you want the whole of Palestine to denounce what happens. Unfortunately, as we saw at the weekend in England, splinter groups and lone wolves and people with voices jump up and down and wave placards, and it's disgusting, absolutely disgusting. What I want to ask you is, 2 more hostages overnight freed, allegedly Hamas saying if Israel stops the bombing, you'll get the hostages, propaganda, tit for tat, and we head for a war that will cause ridiculous losses, whilst understanding the need to exterminate Hamas. What does the thought of that genuinely to you do as a human being? Does that fill you full of fear, or is it a necessity now?
What we have seen since October 7th is that if that level of brutality and atrocities, if that's possible, if it is supported, if there is glee, if people then erupt in support, then that hate that brought it needs to go away. It's not just a cell. It's not a terrorist cell. The world needs to understand that the entire idea has to go. And of course, this fills me, every Israeli, with fear, because we don't just see the acts themselves. We see the ideas, the hatreds that has bred them, and we only see them getting stronger and stronger. And we don't see them just in Gaza. We see them in Berlin and in London and New York. And we see too many people close their eyes, wanting to believe that this was not possible. And we're asking, where is the Britain of World War II that knew what it was standing against, that knew that it had not only to get rid of a few Nazis, that it had to change a people, that it had to create a peaceful vision based on the fact that ideas were no longer acceptable. And as long as people think that free Palestine is an acceptable idea rather than understand it for what it is. If people will close their eyes to from the river to the sea, and these are not lone wolves, these are the chants everywhere.
Einat, I have to jump in. I very much appreciate you being on. I understand your passion